Hello, back again for part 2 of Ancient Judaism vocabulary. Okay, so the exile. The exile is a really interesting period of time. It happens around 500 BCE. Down here, you can see that there are some more exact dates for that. So the exile occurs in which, just on the surface level, an exile means that you are being banished or, whoops, I misspelled that. Banished or forced to leave. So you're being, for example, if Dr. Reif came up to me and said, Lakin, you're exiled from Emory and Henry, then that means that I would have to leave Emory and Henry. I couldn't come back. I'll be banished. So the exile relates to the Babylonian conquest, in which the Babylonians were a very strong military group. And so what they did is that they came in and that they took over Israel, or, they took over, I guess it would have been Judah at this point. And so what occurred is that in order to kind of take over a little bit more, they imposed their power by removing all of the religious leaders from the Jewish political system, from the Jewish temples. And so people who were like prophets, who were teachers, who were elders, who were really respected members of their communities, in the Hebrew communities, they were forced out. They were forced into exile. They could no longer be there. Okay, so that's what that means. Okay, so synagogues. Keep in mind, how many temples are there? There's one. So there's one temple, but many synagogues. A synagogue is like your neighborhood church. It is a place of worship for the Jewish people. And there would have been many of them in many communities. So if you wanted to go on Saturday, which would have been the Sabbath day, we'll get to that word a bit later on, for the Jewish people, if you wanted to go worship, then instead of going all the way to the temple, you would just go down the street to the synagogue, which would have been like going to a chapel or a church in our community. Okay? So let's talk about the diaspora. Diaspora refers to the dispersion or scattering is another word. Scattering of the Jewish people across the world. Okay, so this is what happens whenever you have, for example, the Babylonians coming in and taking over the Hebrew people. They're forced into exile, or for whatever reason, maybe they're just moving around. Maybe they're immigrating to other parts of the world. So you have these Jewish people who are all over the world at that point, in many, many different countries. And you saw that today. Interestingly enough, I think there are more Jewish people in the United States than there are in the nation of Israel in modern times. So you get this idea where there are Jewish people and those Jewish traditions all over the world. Let's talk about Hellenization, shall we? Hellenization refers to Greek language and culture. Who brought that into place? Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great was a powerful military leader who took over much of the known world at that time. Whenever he took over, he made all of the countries that he was controlling speak and participate in Greek language and traditions. So you have Alexander the Great. He absolutely loves Greek language. He's really passionate about it. He loves Greek philosophy. So this is where you get this idea of Greco-Roman, where the Romans participate in a lot of Greek-style languages and religions and traditions. And that's why, because Hellenization is this movement toward Greek language and culture. And Alexander the Great, who loved Greek language and culture, he really made that happen because he was such a great military leader. And whenever he took over these other countries and these other lands, he said, hey, guess what, guys? My name's Alexander the Great. I'm your leader now. And I want you all to speak and to know something about this Greek culture. So that's where you get that idea from. The Septuagint, first of all, let's talk about this LXX. What that is it's referring to the 70 writers. I would encourage you to know a little bit about that legend. The 70 writers, it is said that 70 writers came and all wrote the same translation of the Old Testament. And so that's why they thought that if 70 writers all could come together and make the same translation, it must be the Word of God, because how else would 70 different people go about being able to write down word for word the exact same thing? That's a legend. Who knows if that's true or not, but either way, that's where the name comes from. The Septuagint is the Greek translation of the Old Testament, or the Hebrew Bible. Okay? Antiochus and the Maccabean Revolt. I won't try to pronounce his last name because I will definitely botch it. I'm horrible at pronouncing his name. Antiochus was a Greek-type figure. He was a leader, a military leader, and a political leader. And whenever he came to have, partial control, at least over the Hebrew people, because at this point Israel did not have its own military and political independence per se. It was being taken over by other countries and by these Greek forces. You have Antiochus, who's coming in as their leader, and he implements this persecution of Jewish beliefs and practices. He goes in and he defiles the temple. And you can think he's outlawing the speaking of Hebrew. He's outlawing the practice of practicing Yahweh. He's defiling the temple by putting up images of Zeus and by sacrificing pigs, which are really dirty animals. And it's a sin for Hebrew people to touch pigs. So clearly the Hebrew people are not happy about this. They're seeing this as like a smack in the face, not only to them, but to their God, because, they're defiling the temple, they're outlawing their religious and worship practices for the Hebrews. So what they do is you have this family of Maccabees. That's their name. They're called Maccabees. And what they do is that their father leads them up to the hills, go into the mountains, and lead. I didn't spell that. And they lead guerrilla warfare against Antiochus and Antiochus's forces, because they're pretty pissed off. And what they want is they want to have some sort of independence back. They want to be able to practice their religion and to have a say over their government. And they actually end up winning for a short period of time. They go in and they cleanse the temple. That's where you get Hanukkah from, interestingly enough. But have this in mind, Antiochus is kind of this corrupt ruler, and the Maccabees, they're this family that's starting this revolt back against him. Okay, so you have Herod the Great. Herod the Great was a ruler put into power by the Romans. He wasn't very well liked. He ruled during Jesus' lifetime, when Jesus was a baby. So tune in for the very next video, and we're almost done with this, and we'll finish this up, and we'll go on to some other topics. So see you all very, very soon.